We are continuing our conversation with Jerry Gillis about church partnership. This is the Saturation podcast, where we have conversation with church leaders about the life of faith and mission of the church. My name is Levi Pancake. I'm a local church pastor in Central New York. I've already introduced Jerry quickly, but if this is part two of a two-part conversation on the importance of greater body partnership in order to see access to the gospel for a particular region. So let's continue this conversation now on church partnership. You gave one great example of a way to facilitate greater body partnership, praying for other churches, specifically in your worship services. Give me a few other ways.
Sure.
Like I can think of some of what we've done in our local context, but I'd love to hear from you.
Sure.
What are some other practical ways that you can do this?
Yeah. So because of God, God's blessed us with people resources, some financial resource, some of those things. Not everybody's in the same place. I totally understand it, but it's kind of where we were. We realized we've got some brothers and sisters in some places that are in tough spots. Like it's a hard place. They don't have a lot of resource. They don't have a lot of people resource. They have very little financial resource. They may be co-vocational in leading a church and then working another job at the same time, and it's challenging. So what we did one time is we actually set aside a sum of money. We recruited people from our church, coached them on what we wanted them to do, sent them to other congregations that Sunday so that they could deposit in the offering of that church a blessing to them. It's amazing how when you choose to be a blessing to other congregations, you're sharing. You're not consuming it all, but you're sharing with them. And they're like, what would motivate you to do this? Mm-hmm. That conversation becomes super easy at that point because we're not asking anything from them. Like we're not saying, hey, we want you to come and give us a financial something or whatever. Like we're not asking that. We just want you to know we're for you. Mm-hmm. We need you. Like it's important that you're here. And how can we be a friend to you? How can we be a blessing to you?
Right.
And by the way, you're probably going to help teach us some things as well. So we don't look at relationship one-sided. We look at it like you've got something to bring. We've got something to bring. Whatever that is, we need that. This is what we need to be able to do together. Also, what we've done is we borrowed and shared. Leadership function doesn't, just because you're in a large setting, you might have a few exceptionally gifted people maybe in some spaces or whatever, but we borrow and share. I mean, we're filming a podcast right now, and the people that put this together, they're really good at what they do.
Sure.
Right? They give us a nice set, and they've figured out how to make all this stuff come to life. You and I, we have no clue how to do this, right?
Nope. None whatsoever.
Think about if you're a pastor in a place and you don't have any of that resource, you don't have any of that ability. Our folks have gone to some of these places and done that.
Yeah.
Like during COVID, we set up studios for pastors who were shut down so that they could come and film their message and maybe even music or a little bit or whatever. They could film it, and then our guys put it together for them, kind of just handed it to them so that they could put that out on their YouTube channel or Facebook Live or whatever, so that they actually had something that they could put out for their folks to minister to them. Mm-hmm. This is just part of whatever you got, whatever resources you have. The goal is looking at the whole and saying, what assets do we have? Mm-hmm. What people do we have? What resources can we bring in partnership for the sake of this place?
Yep.
Right? That's what we're trying to do. So if you're a larger congregation listening to this and you've got assets and people and all those things, that is not only for your consumption.
That's right.
It is for the mission of God in a place. And we have to think in those terms. Maybe you don't have a lot of that. You can still be a blessing. There's things that you can do that aren't monetary in any way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it may be you. It may be that you're an incredible trainer of disciples, and that we need you to come and do that for us.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about sharing and borrowing people, assets, resources, whatever that looks like.
Giftings, yeah, you mentioned
giftings. We've done it. We talked about Ryan Cozy earlier. We employed Ryan Cozy on our church staff. And 95% of his job didn't have to do with our local church.
Yeah.
It had to do with the Church of Western New York and helping them out and helping SCP out and helping other, this was his job. But we employed him so that we could make him a blessing.
That's right.
To all those that are around us. So you just have to view it in your context. God will give you the creativity to think about, what does partnership in the gospel look like? It can be something tangible like church planting. Like you can be a part of that, right? Together. And maybe you don't have a lot to bring to the table financially. That's okay. Maybe you help to train, so give social support, help them see what you've done in your context.
If you're an older pastor, you can invest in younger men.
Their spiritual maturity, their families, their whatever. Like, this is partnership. Like, this is real partnership.
Building, you mentioned assets.
Absolutely.
We have 7 different churches that use our facilities.
Exactly.
Throughout the week.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the heart of partnership, right? You've got assets that you can bring to bear for the kingdom of God. You let other churches use your facilities. There's a million different ways if we'll allow the Holy Spirit, if we'll just say, here we are. What is it you want us to do in our setting to move forward this idea of partnership in the greater body of Christ for the sake of the mission? It's not just unity for the sake of unity. It's for the sake of the mission of God in the place that we're in.
Yeah. We've done a great job making a biblical and compelling case for why it needs to be a priority. I can already hear, and you and I maybe thought this, and certainly we've heard it from others, where some of I agree with you, but I'm busy.
Yeah.
I have a family life. I got to write a sermon. I've got all these other people within our own church that I'm caring for, leading, shepherding. I got a staff I'm leading, whatever it is. I don't have any margin to connect with other pastors. I agree it's important, but in terms of the priority list, I just can't move it up higher. What would you say to a leader who's in that boat? And what is a small step? Because you gave really helpful, practical examples.
Yeah.
The potential concern with that is it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like what is something they can do in terms of their time, and how can they make a small step without giving up some of those other responsibilities?
I think maybe I would, and I've done this, so I'm not saying maybe I would, because I've actually done this. But if we wanted to think theoretically, and I've actually had this conversation with somebody before, I'd flip it on its head this way. I would say, okay, I hear you. Let me ask you a question. If you have a church member coming to you who's saying, Pastor, I heard your message on generosity, on giving. And I'll just be honest with you, I've got some things tied up here, and I've got some things tied up here, and I've got some things tied up here, and I'm kind of tapped out. I just don't know that I've got margin to be able to invest anything in the kingdom. What would you say to them? And they sit for a minute, and they already know, like, I've been trapped.
That's a bit heavy-handed, Pastor Jerry.
I have been trapped, right? And my goal wasn't to be like, super squirrely or trapping, but I want to give them an opportunity to think about it in that context. How would you counsel that person? Would you tell them, cool, don't worry about it? Or would you say, this is really an obedience issue. Jesus made it really clear. Where your treasure is, there your heart is, right? Can't serve God and mammon. You'll love the one, hate the other. So you'd bring back some of what you were teaching them, right? And you would say to them, this becomes an issue of obedience. And so obedience is what should structure your priorities, right? And you'd have that conversation, and you would say, but I understand some of this stuff maybe that you're doing. Okay, I got it. But how about we take a baby step?
Mm-hmm.
How about we take a baby step? Maybe I'm not talking to you about, some percentage of your, whatever. Like I'm going to say, you better start giving 10% or no. Let's start somewhere. And so what I would say, and usually in this case, pastor would say, I hear you. I would say, for you, pastor, I would ask the question, do you believe this? Do you believe this is true? Do you believe that Jesus, in saying what he said in the prayer that he was praying, do you believe that there's a theological conviction that comes with that? Do you believe Paul when he talks about this idea, when he's talking about the oneness, one faith, one Lord, one baptism, but he talks about this unity, right, that we have. that we preserve, and that ultimately it's for the sake of the mission of God. When you and you've taught on them probably, Pastor, do you believe it? And if you believe it, then you'll act on it.
Mm-hmm.
James says, don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. So could we take a baby step in the direction of what you believe to be obedience? What if you said you would say, I'm going to give 5% of my week this week to beginning the process of developing partnership? Make it easy. Make it small. Make it bite-sized. Would you do that? You get a yes answer, right? You get a yes answer. But then you realize when you start stepping into obedience, what that begins to look like. Now, I realize COVID was a great reset for a lot of us, but prior to COVID, I was probably in a space where 65 to 70% of my time was local church. And maybe 30 to 35% of my time was not. Mm-hmm. Because I was dealing with what was going on in the region, what we're doing nationally, mm-hmm. and some of what we're doing globally,
right?
Like SCP Global. I spent a month in Europe mm-hmm. doing work on behalf of SCP Global,
right?
And I'm busy. I have a lot to do. I have a large congregation. We have a large staff. I have a lot to do. But this flows out of the priority of what we're about. Right. And our overseers get that. And you have to kind of walk people through that. It takes some time, right? Of course. But yeah, we can always put up, activity can get in the way of priority, mm-hmm. right? And we can always be active. And maybe some good things, but just not the best mm-hmm. things, right? So we have to just come to places where we have a theological conviction. We start aligning our priorities with those theological convictions. And then at least taking some steps in that direction, because as we do, we're going to find that God does something unique in that context.
Right. That's really good. And that 5%, I mean, that could look like one lunch a month.
Sure.
2 lunches a month.
Yeah.
A coffee with another pastor.
Yes.
I mean, like any relationship, but particularly to develop the type of partnership that is necessary for evangelization, it is relationally intensive. It can be labor intensive.
What you just said is incredibly important. Relationships of trust are the bedrock mm-hmm. for partnership. That's the bedrock. Mm-hmm. It's not just transactional.
Right.
These are my brothers and sisters and friends. Like these are my family. Mm-hmm. And I have to think in those terms, talk in those terms. I had a pastor call me recently from another part of our state that I had not met before. And through some mutual acquaintances, he called. He said, here's what's happened. We got some pastors that are now getting together to pray together, but I realized that for our partnership longer term, we're always going to be able to pray together, but we've got to have something's got to sit in the middle of all this, right? And he was like, I could tell God was doing something here very unique. But he said something I thought was very, very incredible. He said, what woke me up to this is that I saw in different places tragedies occurring, things happening in spaces. And the Church of Jesus did not have one voice to be able to speak to them. And I said, we had somebody in Buffalo, New York, and this made national and global news. A very disturbed young man from not in our community drove into our community to a grocery store that predominantly African Americans inhabit that grocery store on that part of our city. And that's why he came specifically there, to kill black people. It's literally why he came. And he murdered 10 people. But the Church of Jesus in our region, because we're in relationships of trust, not only were we able to reach out to our brothers and sisters in the city and speak to them, stand with them, encourage them, pray for them, because many of them lost people or new people, because it's a pretty close community in our region. We're like we call ourselves we're We're the biggest small city, in anywhere. Everybody's kind of related and knows one another and those kinds of things. And then we were able to take out a full-page ad together as the body to speak to these things and speak the gospel together in that. That doesn't happen without relationships of trust. So what you said and what my brother in another part of our state is coming to the understanding of, it's imperative. Because you got to be able to have real conversations with one another. Sometimes there's going to be hiccups, and you've got to know that the trust and the love and the commitment that I have with my family is going to be able to endure this, because that's just how life is, right? So I'm glad you brought that up because it's super important.
Yeah, that's a great testimony to the importance of greater body partnership being postured to respond to a need of a community, a tragedy in a community.
And of course, we responded in lots of tangible ways, but also had a voice to be able to speak into it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
you. Appreciate the ministry that you guys have and the emphasis on partnership. If you would like to hear more conversations with church leaders about the life of faith and mission of the church, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And you can also find more information on scpglobal.org. Thank you for listening to the Saturation Podcast, where we have discussions with church leaders about the life of faith and mission of the church. This podcast is produced by Saturation Church Planning. Saturation Church Planning exists to glorify God through partnering with church leaders in nations, regions, cities throughout the world towards the full evangelization of those places through the mobilization of the church. For more information, please visit scpglobal.org.